everyone, and welcome back to lesson 4 of my online photo classes. I wanted to send a huge thank you to everyone that submitted their photos for lesson 3, which was on textures. If you missed lesson 3, go back, check out the link and watch that video and take some pictures of textures. But for those of you that did and were able to send in their photos, I wanted to send a big thank you to everyone who has been submitting photos each week. It's always great for me as a teacher to see and experience the things that you guys are seeing. And it shows in your photos how much fun you're having. It shows that you're getting out there and exploring. So I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who has sent in photos so far. Because it brings a smile to me every time I see all the photos coming in, and I learn from you guys as much as you're learning from me. You guys aren't afraid to get out there and explore all the different angles of you, trying new things. So you guys give me inspiration for when I go out and take photos again. Now, before we get into lesson 4 today, I wanted to touch on what happens if you are getting discouraged, or maybe you're not super interested in whatever the lesson is for the week that you're watching. And the thing with photography is that it's a way for us to explore. And there's lots of things to learn, and they can be applied in so many different ways. So, the skills that you're learning from each of these classes, maybe you're not super interested in taking photos of shapes or colors or texture, but the skills that you're learning in each of those classes, you can take them and go use them when you take photos of things that you do like to take photos of. So, don't get discouraged. Just kind of focus on what it is, the skill. If you're not super interested in the lesson topic, focus on the skill that you're going to learn, practice it, and then practice it with things that you like taking photos of. So there's always something new to learn. That's one of the great things about photography. So let's get into lesson 4, which this week is going to be on leading lines. Now, leading lines, we use them in photography in order for us to draw our viewers' eyes towards something. So we use it as kind of a guiding pathway for our viewers to what to look at in our photos. Leading lines can occur naturally, like in nature. If you think of a leaf has veins on it. And those little veins, they kind of squiggle through the leaf. And if we look at it, our eyes kind of follow along the pathway of those leaves. Leading lines can occur in man-made things as well, such as buildings or even your house, or a bridge maybe, a pathway. So it can occur in nature, and it can also be something that is made by us. Now, we use leading lines as a way for us to easily show our viewer where we want their eyes to go in the photos that we are taking. They help our viewer focus on the main subject. So it could be the horizon, like at sunset or sunrise. We want to focus our viewer's eyes towards that. It can also be something like mountains in the distance, where we want our viewers to sort of move through the photo towards the mountains. They help us focus on the main subject. So we use leading lines in our photos to describe to our viewers where we want them to look. Another thing that leading lines can do for us in our photos is they can create depth in our photos, as well as symmetry. So what does all of that actually look like? Well, let's get into a few examples so you can see how leading lines can be used in our photos to have our viewers' eyes follow along. Okay, so let's take a look at a few examples of leading lines. Here we have leading lines that occur in nature. We have this pathway that sort of goes up into the photo, and it creates this sort of curved leading line that we want to follow along. Here we have two dogs, and we have this roadway that is leading up to them, and we want to follow that roadway so that we can look at the photo of the dogs. This one's kind of a funny one. We've got sort of a tent trailer RV on the left-hand side. The bottom line of it, we follow it along until we reach the chicken in the farm. Now, leading lines can also occur in buildings and houses and things like that. This is an example of a building with an elevator shaft, and we've got these lines that we follow all the way to the top. So it guides the viewer's eye all the way up the elevator windows. Here's another example of something that is man-made. We've got a bridge on a mountain. This was taken when I went up the Sea to Sky gondola in Squamish, BC. Got to the top of the mountain, and there was this bridge where you could walk from one side to the other. And I really liked how these lines kind of lead you towards the other side of the mountain, and the mountain kind of appearing in the clouds. So these lines guide the viewer's eye through the photo as kind of a way to show them where to look. We can also have things like abstract lines. Here I really liked the colorful yellow pipes on the side of a building, and I really liked how they kind of went from up to over and down, or vice versa, down to over and up. Really kind of creates that movement through one side of the photo to the other for the person looking at your photo. Here's an example of the obstacle course at the Bike to Work Day for kids to participate in. We've got these cones that create a pathway that we follow along as the cyclists make their way through the obstacle course. Here's another example in a forest, this time at winter. We've got sort of this curving pathway that goes from the front of the photo all the way through to the back of the photo. So it guides our viewer through the photo. Here's an example of all of the cyclists doing the Bike to Work Day ride. You can see that there's a pathway in the middle of the photo, trees all around it. The cyclists are making their way through the pathway, and we want to follow along and see where they're going. Here's an example of a bridge. This is the footbridge at Assiniboine Park in Winnipeg. And you can see we have these two lines that sort of keep leading all their way. The lines lead through the photo, and they kind of meet up on the other side of the river. So we have these leading lines on a bridge that we want to follow along. This one, again, is a little bit more abstract in that we've got the boats on the water at the bottom part of the photo. But if you look at the top, there's sort of 3 to 4 lines in the clouds, and they're all kind of pointing towards the sails, the top of the sails of or the masts, I guess, where the sails get attached to on all of the boats. We have these lines in the clouds that kind of move your eye down towards the top of the boats. Here we've got a fallen log, and we've got the bark of the tree, which kind of has squiggle lines. So these squiggle lines move throughout from the front of the photo to the back of the photo. And we've got these lines that we want to, our eyes want to follow along. Another fun example of squiggly lines, here I'm standing up against a wall that has vines that grow on it. And there's some roots, and there's the vine, and they kind of make their way all the way up the wall. Now, I crouched down a little bit to sort of see how that changed the look of the vines, and you can sort of see there's even more squiggles. By looking up, we can see how they kind of reach for the sky. Here's an example of a farmer's field that has multiple squiggly lines. So we have kind of these lines that move from left to right all the way through the photo, and they kind of lead our eye along the journey of these squiggly lines. You can also have leading lines that occur inside buildings. So here I have an example of sort of a tunnel or an indoor walkway. We've got the roof above and the narrow tunnel. The lines keep going and going and going throughout the photo, and it kind of looks like they disappear off into the distance. That's a really great example of leading lines when the lines sort of move through the frame move through the photo towards the back of the photo, and it looks like they almost kind of disappear. Here's an example of a pathway. We've got sort of the lines of the tiles on the ground, as well as the lines of the buildings, leading our eyes through this tunnel to see, through this walkway to sort of see where it's going. And we've got the light at the end of the tunnel. Now, you can also have curved lines that kind of guide your eyes. Here we've got sort of the tunneling effect, but we've got these arches that move through the photo and guide our eye towards the building in the background. Now, I also wanted to show you guys an example of what happens when you change your point of view to your photos. So here I have an example of a covered, arched walkway, and I'm standing straight looking down it, and we've got these great lines. There's two lines along the pathway that kind of look like they go, and then they kind of disappear at the end, looking straight on. Now, I simply took 2 to 3 steps over to my right to change up my position to see what it did to the lines. And what I found was that the circles of the arch where the light was coming in, they became sort of bigger at the part with the statue there on the wall. And then as they got farther along down the pathway, they got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So I was able to simply change the look of my photo just by taking 1 or 2 steps over to the right. So that's one thing to sort of take as a tip or a hint for when you're taking photos of leading lines, is to maybe start, as you normally would come across it and see it, but then explore a little bit and change up your position to see how that changes the look of your photos. Now, one of the things that you'll want to pay attention to when you're taking photos of leading lines is where you're positioned. Now, does this sound familiar? Back in lesson 2, we talked about your point of view or your angle of view and how that can affect your photos. And it's used a lot in leading lines. Where you are and how the lines move through your frame plays a big role in how the viewer's eyes are led through the photo. So things that you can look at for lines, you can look for things like trees in the forest, lines in the pathway or walkways, and you'll want to get creative and explore the different angles of view or the different points of view and how that changes the lines in your photos. And what does that do to the photo when you look at it? You can look for straight lines, you can look for diagonal lines, and even circular lines or curved lines are things that can allow your viewer to look through the frame towards your subject. Once you've found those lines that you like, try moving around. So move to the left, move to the right, move up or move down. Changing your point of view changes how the lines may appear in your photo. And you want to see how those movements that you make affect the lines in your photo. So explore. Always, always, always get out there and explore the different angles of view when you're incorporating the leading lines into your photos. Now, your assignment for this week is to continue exploring, this time looking for leading lines, both in nature or as well as something that is made by us. Explore those different points of view to see how it changes the lines in your photos, and see if you can find ways to add lines to your photos, to add depth to your photos. Now, a little hint here is if you want to increase the depth in your photo is to have something that's called a vanishing point. So the lines will lead towards something that looks like it's almost disappearing at the back of your frame. So an example from before is sort of those leading lines towards a horizon where the sun is setting. Those lines keep going through the frame, they get smaller and smaller and smaller as they get towards the back of the photo. It's where they're disappearing into the distance. So, after you've had a chance to go out and explore and take all of your leading line photos, what I'd like you to do is take a look through all of your photos and see if there's one or two ways that you've changed your point of view that you really like better than the others. For me, for example, I really like crouching down and seeing how that changes my photos, how that changes the leading lines in my photos. So you'll often find me when I'm out and about taking photos is I'm crouched down a lot of the time because I think it's such an interesting viewpoint. So see if you're the same way. See if there's a certain point of view that you guys really like. Then, after you've looked through all your photos, I'd like you to choose 5 of your favorite. And if you're participating, you can submit them to me via email, and then I will put them up for the weekly slideshow. So, I hope you guys have a lot of fun getting out there. Here where I am in Winnipeg, Canada, the weather is slowly getting warmer outside, so I'm spending a bit more time outdoors. So I'm hoping that wherever you are, you're able to spend at least a little bit of time outdoors exploring the natural leading lines, as well as exploring in and around wherever you are the man-made leading lines. So have fun, explore, and we will see you next week for lesson 5. Thanks very much, guys, for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye. Oh, I always forget, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. That way you will get the update when there is a new video posted, which next week will be lesson 5. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Bye.